Hi, this is Richard Edelman, and you're listening to The Trust Makers.
Hi, I'm Smita Reddy, Global Chair of Food and Beverage at Edelman. There's no bigger day for American sports than Super Bowl Sunday. There's also no bigger day for advertisers. Companies pay millions of dollars for 30 seconds of attention, delighting and dazzling viewers with some of the most creative and star-studded ads of the year. One of this year's fan favorite commercials was by Hellmann, with a little help with some familiar faces of Jon Hamm, Brie Larson, and Pete Davidson.
John?
Brie, any idea why we are in a fridge?
Well, I'm Brie.
Yeah, I'm John.
I know, but you're John who?
John Hamm.
So we're Brie and?
Brie and Ham. Ham and Brie, I get it. And Hellman's.
We're dinner.
Joining me for today's episode for more on the making of that commercial is Ben Crook, the Vice President and General Manager of Dressings and Condiments at Unilever. Ben, welcome to the Trust Makers. We're so excited to have you.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
We are excited to dive in on this one. You know, aside from the game, everyone's really there talking about the commercials. So let's talk about Hellmann's. Give us, our listeners who may have missed it, just give us an overview of the ad that you guys ran this year for Hellmann's.
Yeah, we firstly, thank you for having me. Super excited to be here. What a year we've had. And it's been a journey to get to the finals. You can imagine Super Bowl is not an easy thing to pull off. But for those who missed the ad this year, we had, you open up on a fridge and you see a confused Jon Hamm searching around the back of the fridge. And Brie is kind of the other side of our iconic Hellmann's jar, hearing a rustling, and she kind of calls out John, and he is, Brie, is that you? And so they recognize each other. John is a little bit kind of further behind in terms of why are we here? And Brie obviously points out the fact that, well, I'm Brie and you're, John, and he is John. And so they, she's ahead of the joke in terms of, it's obviously Brie and Ham. And so eventually he catches on. And then obviously the second kind of layer of the joke is obviously that they're in Pete Davidson's fridge. And we're bringing Pete back from our ad last year where he was tackling food waste with Gerard Mayo. And so we thought for fun and continuation, we'd bring Pete back. So then Pete obviously is quite excited to make a meal out of obviously ham brie with some Hellmann to make a delicious panini, and quotes the line, "I'm going to eat you guys," which I think is obviously quite a funny moment in the ad. We then fast forward to Pete's Super Bowl party, where now there's this third universe that appears with the life size, real life size characters enjoying a party together, and Pete offers them a ham and brie panini, which obviously then John quizzically looks at him and said, "That's weird." And obviously when we close with the "make taste not waste" with Hellmann's line. So it was, what we try to do is we try to get attention around obviously quite a serious issue of food waste and make it fun though. And obviously I think as a brand as iconic as Hellmann's and Best Foods, we obviously want to make sure that people understand that there's a serious point behind the humor that we put forward in this big forum.
So Ben, take us a little bit behind the curtain a bit. What was your process like for planning the Super Bowl ad? Like how far out are you guys planning?
We start way in advance of Super Bowl. So, often when you finish a Super Bowl ad, you give yourself a couple of weeks to recover. We then start looking at data, analyzing the performance, kind of, and honestly asking yourself the question, what went well, what didn't go so well? And if, as we plan them for the next year, what might we do better? I think the other important question we often look at is the competition. It's a really important moment just to kind of step back and look at the body of work that obviously other manufacturers did, other brands did, and just to kind of, take a step back and benchmark yourself in terms of how well did we do on the big day. Then you start kind of, it's almost a Men in Black kind of red pen moment when you then almost forget what you've just done, and you take all that lessons forward and you start again. And it seems like you start really early, but often we start in kind of March or April, writing kind of the briefs, really going through the diligence in terms of what we want to kind of move forward with the following year. And then we get into briefing mode. And so, often we're trying to purchase the media in April. So we secure the spot. So we make the business decision in terms of, we out generally kind of at least 9 to 10 months ahead of Super Bowl. We then obviously commit to briefing agencies, and then starting the process in terms of getting the initial concepts, ideas. We test it in kind of focus group type settings initially, just to get a read in terms of concept. Do they get the concept? Do they like the concept? Is the message clarity coming through? What do they take away? Importantly, what are the watch outs? Because when you're on a stage where there's over 100 million people watching it, and that's just a TV audience, you also have to be mindful of obviously anything that you might be unintentionally communicating, as well as intentionally communicating. So again, you need to be very mindful in terms of what it is you're putting out there for the business, and ensuring there's no business risk, but more importantly, communicating what you want to communicate in a meaningful way, but also hopefully a funny way. And so we often take 3 ideas, then further into further research, where we've modified the idea. We've taken it a little bit further with the creative team, and we've got down to almost storyboard or animatic type creative, where we're then really trying to understand which is our winning idea. We often shoot the ad towards kind of October, November. So again, probably 3-4 months ahead of the Super Bowl. It's a really fun process. I have to say, in the 23 years at Unilever, there's nothing more fun than working on the big campaign, as it were. And so for us, it's definitely a process, but it's again something every year we learn. We get a little bit better, I think, and obviously we get more experience in the big game. But the moment you see your ad on TV, you can sit back and just be proud of what you've done, and as well as kind of hopefully listen to the reactions, because obviously that's the other thing. It's like anything, when you put a creative piece of work out there, there's always positive sentiment, there's always negative sentiment, and so there's often that review or that editor who you perhaps don't always agree with their perspective, but again, in a non-emotional way, you take the feedback and you take it on the chin, and you try and obviously learn from that. And I have to say, thankfully, we've had largely really good sentiment for all 3 campaigns. And I think I've been really proud with how not only we've been portrayed in the media, and obviously we've had people kind of support our business, but I think ultimately, people really appreciate the fact that we're bringing, this food waste problem to life in a fun way. And I think largely people have been very supportive and encouraging of that for us, which has been great.
Yeah, the planning process seems almost like, what a team goes through to prepare for the next Super Bowl, or equivalent to the time it takes to, birth a baby. So, this was your baby's delivery on Super Bowl night. You touched on this at a very high level around food waste, but what was the thought process of having this star-studded cast, Hellmann's role in that? Would love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think the creative team at Wonderman Thompson obviously spent a lot of time thinking, and they bring ideas forward, and we've had this idea presented before, and it's a simple idea of personifying leftover or looked over ingredients in the fridge or in the cupboard, and we've looked at the idea a couple of times, and as you look at the ideas evolve, sometimes it takes a slightly different evolution of the idea, or slightly different kind of way it evolves for it to obviously come to life in a way where we go, actually, that's a really good idea. So I think that the simplicity of this idea is that we know that 40% of food that's made or grown in the US, 40% of that food goes to waste. We then kind of, as you dig deeper into the insights into the US, particularly, what we know is that in the home, a further 40% of food waste happens, which I think is quite an alarming number. And I think obviously in a country of plenty, it doesn't almost feel like that's a problem for us to face into. But obviously, what we want to inspire consumers to think about as they look into their fridge, that they see possibilities. They look at food ingredients in their cupboards or their fridge, and that they see the ability to make something delicious with that slight touch of or dollop of magic from Hellmann's. But more importantly, that they can transform ingredients or leftover ingredients or food into something that just tastes delicious. And I think at the heart of it, that's what we're trying to do. It links to a bigger goal that we share with the UN Sustainable Development Goal, which we want to halve food waste by 2030. So the bigger impact we're trying to drive is to halve food waste as part of that bigger UN goal. And as part of that, we also want to inspire 100 million Americans every year to do something with those leftover ingredients and those things that they see in their fridge. The insight behind it is that we also find, again, as we dig deeper, is that people often, either it's too much work or they don't know what to do, or it's just easier to order takeout. And I think what we want to do is to kind of, in that moment of perhaps pause, or that moment of unsure what to do with food, that we can obviously inspire and help them to make something delicious.
Yeah, I think this is so fascinating on how you all took such a really, what could seem like a very big problem, and it is a big problem, but something that, by simple everyday actions, you can shift. That stat is really staggering, that 40% of food waste happens at home. I'm sure people might think that it's happening outside of their home.
Yeah.
And I love the way that you have, the simplicity of make, taste, not waste, to really bring it down to like the consumer level. And in many ways, like, your fridge is this like creative canvas that isn't so daunting, that, maybe John Hamm and Brie Larson might even be in. And like you're having fun with it, which I think, I think a lot of people feel like when it comes to issues like sustainability and climate, it needs to feel doom and gloom. But you really brought a lot of humor and fun and creativity into this conversation around food waste, which I think a lot of people would find as inspiration. So 100 million homes, right? That's a big goal. So is the Super Bowl really that pinnacle where you really want to reach the masses for? Is that really why you've all decided to really re-up and continue to advertise there?
Yeah, great question. I think the relevance of food waste around Super Bowl is really big. What we know is that the Super Bowl is the second most food waste day in the calendar year, only behind Thanksgiving. And so again, as you think about those moments when you're entertaining, you're making kind of food for other people, and the amount of people that generally go to other people's houses, that it's a moment where people are excited. It's a big game. It's exciting. It goes on for a long period of time. So often in those moments, people are over preparing food in the anticipation that obviously want to impress their guests, but also that they want to make sure there's plenty of food to go around. And I think the hangover post Super Bowl and obviously post Thanksgiving is that people have lots of leftover food or ingredients or partial ingredients that they're not always sure what to do with. And I think that's where we as a brand want to kind of help in those moments where food waste could happen and likely will happen. But hopefully we can inspire people what to do with those food ingredients. But I do want to come back there, because I think you also have the point that's really important, that yes, this is a serious issue. And often when you think about purpose, and obviously purpose has become quite a buzzword in the industry right now. And I think what we try to do is, we just try to make a difference. We're a big brand. Again, we've both said it. It's an iconic brand. West of the Rockies, it's Best Foods. East of the Rockies, it's Hellmann's. But again, this is a very trusted brand, and it's got a long-standing heritage of quality and trust behind it, which is why people love the business and the brand. But I think what we're more interested in is making an impact and actually inspiring people what to do. Because if we can make a difference and inspire consumers in terms of how they can use common ingredients in their homes and make something delicious, then the outtake of that, or the downstream impact of that, is that therefore we will, as an outward impact, reduce food waste. So again, that's what's more important for us, is that we in a helpful way inspire consumers, and by doing that and really helping Americans to do more with the food they have in hand and not waste, that they will be better off economically, and two, obviously the environmental impact obviously will be halved, hopefully. So again, it's an ecosystem where we're trying to start at the front end. I think the other thing, just having fun with this serious issue, I think is also important. That what we've learned with food waste is we can't lecture people. It's one of those topics where often people don't recognize themselves in those moments of food waste. And again, you could argue in a land of plenty, often that often is overlooked as kind of not a serious issue. But again, we also know that there's many people who do not have a lot of food on the table, and there's many people who need obviously help with that. And so, we're trying to make sure that we bring this opportunity and this serious issue to everyone, but in a way where everyone sees value or role in doing more with the food they have, but also eliminating food waste. We spend so much time, energy growing food that it just seems such a shame to therefore then for all the effort to grow it, to get it to supermarkets, to get it to people's homes, to then obviously throw it away. So again, it is a bigger impact than I think most people realize.
I really liked what you said around that impact piece, because I think, that's sort of the power of your brand. And, our Edelman Trust Barometer finds, that people are attracted to brands that have a larger, deeper meaning or purpose. From your perspective, how is that customer relationship or consumer relationship with your purpose? Do you feel like people are taking away that Hellmann's is about fighting food waste?
Yeah, I think we often this is something we're very keen to do, and we also have we've done a lot of thinking behind how do we attack this in a more systematic way, where obviously we raise awareness firstly of the issue of food waste. We then obviously educate consumers around kind of ways to kind of minimize food waste, and then obviously we inspire people to take action. So again, in the middle part of that, we have a fridge night app where we encourage people to basically kind of what we call flexipes, which are very simple hacks using on-hand ingredients and leftover ingredients, and obviously starting with ingredients first, but showing people the possibilities of what they can do with those simple ingredients to make something delicious. And they're very simple recipes, they're very memorable recipes. But what we know is if consumers go through that change behavior program, that when they come out the other end of that program, they actually reduce their own food waste by 46%. And so we have scientific evidence to show that actually just showing, educating, and getting consumers into a rhythm, as it were, actually you can reduce your food waste in your own home by almost half. So I think that's the science behind it is very clear. But then obviously we're all creatures of habit. And so trying to keep consumers, obviously, as we all are, we go through phases of good behavior and bad behavior in terms of how do we keep ourselves honest in that sense and keep inspiring consumers to do more with the ingredients they have in hand. And obviously not waste food. I think that's a continuous effort that we're obviously committed to, but we're obviously excited about as well. We just feel like it's such a big role that we can play in obviously food waste is a bigger macro issue, but also I think it's important that in a busy world, when if you have families or you're working and you're doing a couple of jobs, like helping consumers to do more with what they have, I think is just and shortcut perhaps sometimes and hacks. I think the role Hellmann's can play is just really important in that sense.
I really love that framework around raising awareness of the issue, educating and inspire, because I think a lot of brands actually just raise awareness of the issue, but there's not a lot people can do, right? And they feel stuck and they don't know what to do. And the way you just sort of described it, it can be as simple as hacks. It could just be simple of being mindful of it. And you see that the fact that you've seen that behavior change from your research is really, really phenomenal, right? It makes you feel like, okay, this isn't so daunting. and little simple acts can make a big difference. Let's talk a little bit more about the Super Bowl. Like, you've been at Unilever for 20 years. How is making a Super Bowl ad different from any other advertising campaigns you've worked on?
Well, it's fun. Firstly, let me start there. So it's this will be our third Super Bowl. So we had Amy Schumer as our fairy god mayo, who had the one and only magical power of transforming leftover ingredients into something delicious. We then had Gerard Mayo, who was the ex-Patriots linebacker, Hall of Famer, who would tackle consumers in their homes in those moments of food waste. And again, the intent of that is to try and bring awareness and self-reflection to consumers about, throwing bread ends away, or perhaps just being kind of, not recognizing that behavior of food waste in themselves. So there's that aha moment we were going for. And this year was a bit more kind of brick to the forehead, where we were being contextual relevance of being in the fridge, and showing kind of those everyday ingredients that you have, and showing how you can elevate those into kind of a more refined sandwich, and as in the panini of this year. And so again, I think the personification of food through John Hamm and Brie Larson was obviously over the top intentionally to try and bring attention to that. We often try to find ways, particularly in the Super Bowl ad, to get attention. If you imagine consumers, and we've all been there in those Super Bowl parties, you're excited about the game, you're excited to see the commercials, there's a lot going on, and you need to stand out. And I think what we've learned about Super Bowl is, there's a couple of things we have to do well. One is we need to find the right tonality. For us, it's not a moment where we want to be overly serious. It's a moment where we want to bring brevity and fun and entertainment to consumers. We also want to land a serious message. And so again, for us as a business, this is a big moment to land a serious point, but we want to do that in a way where it's engaging, it's memorable, and people enjoy the ad. I think also visually, you want to be arresting. We try to find a way to kind of win what we call the water cooler moment the next day. Can you be the brand that consumers recognize, remember, and talk about the next morning? It's the water cooler. That's the first thing that comes to mind. So it's those kinds of conversations we have with the agency to try and challenge ourselves to do bigger and better work every year. And I think every year the Super Bowl, we've learned more and more in terms of what we can do well and what we can do better. So, it's not easy to break through. And I think if you look at just the body of work that came from the industry this year, I mean, it was fantastic. I mean, there was many ads that I looked at, and yeah, that's good. That's a good piece of work. And I have to say that the standard for me every year gets a bit higher and a bit better. I think everyone learns. There's always the odd surprise. There's always the odd kind of ad that stands out on surprisingly or from nowhere. And so I think that's the joy of being in a Super Bowl. And I think as a brand like Hellmann's, we firmly believe we belong on the Super Bowl stage, particularly with such an important message to land with consumers.
Yeah, and there's also just so much you can do, like pre and post, right, or surrounding the Super Bowl. That's such an exciting moment, and in an era where it's really hard for people to pay attention to your ad and not view it as interruption. This is the entertainment piece, along of course with Rihanna. Let's switch over to mayo, because I feel like I'm really hungry actually after all this conversation, but. Mayo's an interesting one, right? There's a lot of like lovers and deep-seated fans. Like, how do you harness your community of mayo lovers?
Yeah, I mean, I think this business. I've been on many businesses. To your previous question at Unilever, so I've been at Unilever for over 23 years. This is my second stint on this business, specifically in the US. Yeah, there's a lot of love for Hellmann's and Best Foods. And again, I keep saying both brands, obviously, because I want to be mindful of our West Coast advocates and brand lovers and ambassadors, because obviously Best Foods is west of the Rockies. But no, I think it's one of those products, it's one of those categories where if you love mayonnaise, you really love mayonnaise, and you find kind of fun ways to kind of integrate and use Hellmann's. I mean, it is uh, uh, it's a very useful product in the kitchen, is the truth. And so, I just made literally grilled cheese for my family over lunch today, and with the classic tomato soup, and again, it's something that we put on the outside of our grilled cheese or paninis because it gives that nice golden crispy texture that just obviously when you crunch and bite into it's delicious. But again, it equally goes well into kind of dips in terms of, we have the disappearing buffalo chicken dip that is now one of the favorites at not only my New Year's Eve party, but also Super Bowl parties that we host. So it's just very versatile. And I think, that's what we love about this product. It does enable kind of you to elevate those everyday dishes, but just bring that creamy deliciousness to any dish that just, it just is memorable and it's delicious. And you always get the, wow, this is delicious. How do you make this? And so often I find when I'm hosting parties, I'm sharing recipes, and obviously I'm not shy to say Hellmann's or Best Foods is in there.
Yeah, Hellman's has like a ton of hacks, right? And from the grilled cheese, which is one of my favorites, to also the Hellman's chocolate cake, which
Yes,
I love making, and then surprising people with that little fact. It's like one of my favorite moments when I surprise people with that. But for you and your family, obviously, because you are the mayo expert aficionado, what would you say is your favorite way to use Hellman's mayo?
well, I mean, I think surprisingly, I think you've covered a couple of them. So the chocolate cake recipe delivers an incredible moisture to the cake that I think people just go crazy over, which I think is cool. I have neighbors who love to swear by using it as a marinade or a rub, particularly for those keen kind of barbecue folks. I mean, I've spinach dip, buffalo disappearing dip, paninis. For me, there's nothing better than a Thanksgiving turkey leftover sandwich with a healthy dose of Hellmann's mayonnaise and some cranberry sauce. For me, and if there's stuffing left over, I'm happy to put that in as well. For me, that is comfort for me, and that's what I'll just sit back and be happy in terms of not only using my leftovers, but also thinking this is delicious. So.
Love it. Okay. Well, I think you've made all of our listeners very hungry now. So with that, wanted to thank you again for sharing your behind the scenes look on what it was like to advertise in the Super Bowl once again with Hellmann's. Well done.
Thank you.
This year. And I meant it what I said. It was truly a fan favorite. And, having that Pete Davidson connection always, it doesn't hurt. With all of that, I wanted to thank you, Ben, and to all of our listeners, thank you for listening to The Trust Makers.
Thank you for tuning into The Trust Makers, an Edelman podcast in partnership with Advertising Week, where we speak with leaders and other trust builders across institutions. See you next time.